Welcome to Kiwi Chow Down, the game where flocks of ravenous kiwi birds race to the best spots for fruit and woe betide anything that stands in their way. This game plays 1 to 4 players, age 10 and up, and plays about 20 minutes per player. The goal of the game is to gain as many victory points as possible over the course of 4 seasons, which primarily come from the amount of domains that you're able to claim during the course of the game. There are 5 stages to every season: building benefits, action cards, season card resolutions, domain marking, and season change. So, in stage 1, the building benefits. And during the first season of the game, since we haven't had a chance to build anything yet, there wouldn't be any building benefits to go through, but let's pretend that I already have a building on the board. I'm going to place one right here. Now, when I look at the building itself, there are 3 sections, and I'll highlight them here. The top left corner is the benefit that you would gain from this stage. The other 2 benefits happen elsewhere in the game. So looking at this particular building, I would be gaining a kiwi fruit, that's that little spiral symbol, and I would be able to move one of my kiwi throughout the board. That's what that little arrow symbol means, is to move the kiwi bird. We would do that in turn order, starting at first player, and you would be able to choose the order in which you gain the benefits, as that could matter depending on what the benefits are. In stage 2, which is the most of the gameplay will look like, we are playing action cards. Starting with player 1, play 1 action card from their hand, followed by player 2, and so on and so forth. And every person, by the end of that action phase, will play a total of 3 cards from their hand. There are 4 types of action cards in the game. Building cards, denoted by the little hammer at the top of the card. Feeding cards, where we feed our kiwis to make them big and strong. Movement cards, this is where our kiwis move around trying to claim as much territory as they can. And wild cards. Wild cards we'll get into at the end of this section. So, during the building phase, if we look at our flock board, this little board that is in front of us, you'll notice that there are 3 main sections with icons that tell us what we can do. If we're looking at the building section, we're going to look at this bottom section of the board. So, you can build at any section where you have dominance and at least 2 kiwi birds on the hex. So, for instance, if I look at my blue kiwis, there are exactly 2 spaces where I have at least 2 kiwi birds, and you have to have more kiwi birds than any other single player. So technically I still have dominance here, even though there are 3 other kiwi birds, since I still have more than purple, and I have more than pink, and I have more than yellow. And that's why when I placed this building here, I chose one of the hexes that I did in fact have dominance in, just for consistency's sake. Looking at our flock board, in order to build something from the top row, it costs 2 kiwi fruits of the same color. I know that they have to be the same color because they have the equal sign next to the kiwi fruit. So for instance, let's say that I had paid 2 yellow fruits, and I should probably put this card here. Oops. I played the building card, I played my building, I played the building, and I paid my 2 fruits. Must play and build the top row of the buildings before you can play the bottom row. Now, granted, if I really liked these nests, and that's what we call these type of buildings, these are kiwi nests, you can, in fact, I could build this one and the one just below it before building the other top 2, but you have to build the one on top before you can build the one on the bottom. When I build the nest is when I actually gain the immediate benefit of the bottom left-hand corner. So that is a one-time benefit. It happens when you play it, and in this case, it would be that I get to move one of my kiwi birds somewhere, and we'll talk about movement when we get to that card. Okay, that is building. Let's say on my next turn, I chose to do feeding. So I'm going to look at feeding on my kiwi flock board. Feeding costs 2 non-equal kiwi fruits in order to feed our birds. So that's symbolized by the fact that there's a slash through the equal sign. So for instance, let's say I pay 1 green and 1 blue fruit, and I get to feed a kiwi bird. Now, I actually have an option here. I can choose to feed myself, and I would grow my kiwi, and kiwis that are larger tend to have more power. in which point I would take a kiwi from the top of my flock board, always from the left first, and I would add it to one of my stacks. And if I do that, I would gain, by feeding my kiwi, I gain 1 domain marker, and we'll talk about what domain markers do later. Or if I feed an opponent's kiwi bird, so for instance, if I say, okay, I'm going to feed Pink and make him big and strong over here, then I would gain 2 domain markers. And now remember that having domain markers as much as possible on the board is the main source of victory points at the end of the game. What is the value in feeding your opponent's kiwi bird? Well, as you can see, you gain more domain markers, which means that you have a higher chance of putting domains on the board. Also, a kiwi bird of size 3 is the largest a kiwi bird is allowed to be. Anything more than that, and you have overfed your kiwi bird and it explodes. So be careful. That is one of the ways that you can get rid of opponents, is by exploding their kiwi birds and getting rid of something powerful on the board. The third main action that you can do on the action phase is movement. And this is where having higher level kiwi birds can be very beneficial. Now notice on the card, the movement symbol twice. You have to move at least twice during this phase. So I can move 2 different kiwi birds 1 space, or I can move 1 kiwi birds 2 spaces. It's up to you. You are able to move these birds more than 2 spaces if you are willing, and notice we're going to look at the movement symbol on our flock board. If you can pay whatever the 2 kiwi color symbols are on your board. Each board has a different combination. This particular board says paying a red and a green. That would gain you an additional either 1 movement for one of the kiwi birds you've already moved, or moving a 3rd kiwi bird. Now, what that actually looks like, for instance, if I have something that is a level 2 kiwi or higher. If I have a level 1, I'm just moving kiwis around, maybe to try to get dominance in a hex, maybe because I don't have dominance in a hex and there's no point in, like for instance here, there's no point in me keeping this here. I'm probably not going to gain dominance. I might move it into the purple in order to have a likelihood of being able to put a domain marker there later. Or moving higher level kiwi birds can actually push lower level kiwi birds around. So let's say that I wanted to use one of my movements to move my level 2 kiwi bird here. When you do that, you are able to push up to 2 lower level kiwi birds into adjacent hexes, or off the board if you are on the edge. And that is exactly what I would do in this case. Is I would push this kiwi bird off the edge and he would go to the front of the purple's board and stay there until such a time that it will be useful, and I'll get into that. So that is the advantage of having higher level kiwis. You've got a balancing act between, yes, I want them to be higher level, but I don't want my opponent overfeeding them and making them go slowly. The other thing I can do in the movement action is use my leader. So rather than moving 2 different kiwi birds, I can replace one of the movements with my kiwi leader's action. For instance, this one, Chopin. I can move Chopin up to 4 hexes in a straight line. Push all kiwi tokens on all hexes Chopin move through, except the starting and ending hexes. As you can imagine, this is my little kiwi leader right here. That could do a heck of a lot of movement on this board. I'm not going to physically move all of them, but if I were to do 1, 2, 3, 4, every single kiwi bird in these 3 hexes would end up getting pushed off into adjacent hexes. When you use the leader, you have to flip him over because you are only able to use him once per season, and he'll get flipped back over at the end of the season. There are 3 different wild cards in the game. The first half of the wild card, as you can see on the left-hand side, is a card with a question mark in it. That just means that you can do one of the 3 main action cards as one option when you play this. I could either use it as a build card, a feed card, or a movement card. That is the first option on the wild card. Or I can do whatever's on the right-hand side. In this particular wild card, it would be gain 1 kiwi fruit, move 1 kiwi from my flock board here onto the board where I already have a kiwi, or level up one kiwi that I have on the board. So I would be able to take one and level up one of my already existing kiwis, as well as gain a fruit and move one of my kiwis onto the board where I already have a kiwi. Those are the 4 types of cards you will see throughout the game, and there are 9 cards in your deck, 2 of the mains and 3 special wild cards. Once everyone has played their 3 action cards, we move on to stage 3. You'll notice that there are 4 seasons, as we mentioned, so there are 4 season cards in the game. And depending on the season, we have a specific goal that we are competing for. So this particular season, if we look at the top, the goal is to have the most number of nests, most number of buildings on the board. Season 2, it would be the least number of kiwi birds on the green hexes, most number of kiwi birds on the pink hexes, and the most number of level 2 and up kiwis. The bottom left-hand corner represents whoever has the highest number of, in this case, buildings, would gain a victory point. This is one of the other few ways you can gain victory points in the game. Bottom right-hand corner would be what everybody else who didn't win would get. So they would get a domain marker. If there is a tie for first place, then no one gets the first place, and whoever tied would get the second place benefit. So let's say that pink and purple both had 3 buildings and blue and yellow had 1. Pink and purple would get a domain marker, blue and yellow would get nothing. Okay. Stage 4 of the game is the actual placing of the domain markers. And once again, this is the main source of victory points in the game. A domain marker can only be placed if you have both dominance. Once again, that means the most number of kiwi birds on that hex. And you have to have a domain marker that matches that tile. So for instance, I have 2 domain markers in front of me. I have a grassland domain marker and I have a mountain domain marker. So I would only be able to place a domain in a purple or a green hex this round. Eventually I might gain more domain markers from a multitude of places, but right now that's all I can do. In the first 3 seasons, you are only able to place 1 domain marker in turn order. On the 4th season, you can play as many as you are able to play. So, for instance, I would probably choose to play, I don't really have anything going for me. I've got 1 purple space and I have 2 green spaces. I would probably choose to do the green space because I've got more of those. So I would place the domain marker in the tile, and I would take one of my kiwi birds, flip it over, and place it on the domain marker. That signifies that that is a domain token in my color rather than a kiwi. Please note, in the last 2 times that I placed kiwi birds onto the game board, there are actually icons underneath those birds. When you uncover that icon, you would gain that benefit. So I would have gained, it was in the 3rd and 4th circle, I would have gained a kiwi fruit when I placed the 3rd kiwi bird, and I would have gained a domain marker when I placed the 4th kiwi bird. One thing to note is these middle buildings. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a +2 kiwi bird on a tile. What that means is that building counts as 2 kiwi birds, even if you don't have a kiwi bird in that tile. So for instance, if I had this building here, I'd be perfectly in my right to place a domain marker with the purple domain marker, of course, into this hex because I have dominance and I have the purple domain marker. So that is phase 4. And in phase 5 is the season changes. If in this particular case, the card would go to whoever had the first place to signify the victory point, every other card's just going to get flipped over. And now we're in season 2. Okay, we would discard all of the action cards that got played. We would have been drawing this entire time up to 3, by the way. You always draw after you play a card. We would pass the first player marker on to the next player, and we would rinse and repeat starting with the building benefits again. So I would look at the benefit that I had. This particular building would get me 1 kiwi fruit and 1 kiwi movement, and I would flip over my leader and we would continue on. At the end of the 4th season, remember that that's when we get to play as many domain markers as we are able. So we have to have dominance and we have to have the domain marker to go along with it. And you can only play a domain marker in a hex that doesn't already have one. That is a very important thing to note. Whoever has the most domain markers plus victory points, that's the little crown symbol. So you would add the crown symbols and the domain markers. Whoever has the most wins. I hope this has helped. I'm very excited to be able to play this game physically once this is out. I'm excited to see how Draco Studios is going to do with the production. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day.